It has been a heck of a morning, my friends. My goodness. Okay. We have so much to cover today. Opening arguments have just finished in the first criminal prosecution of Donald Trump. And we have so much to talk about in that regard. We also got a Sandoval ruling this morning, and there's a development in the bond case. And we had a juror issue, and there's just so much to talk about. So welcome. This is Resistance Live for the 22nd of April, 2024. We are on a break right now in the New York Criminal Court. We're waiting to find out in the last half an hour that court's going to be in session today, whether or not we're going to start the testimony of David Pecker. But before we get to all of that, I'm coming to you as always from occupied unceded Tongva territory, also known as Southern California. Today, for our visually challenged viewers, I am wearing a white button-down shirt. My hair is down. I'm a pink-skinned, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman. I'm in front of my plant, my lamp, and my chair, and my bookshelf. And I'm really glad you're all here today. Okay, so let's just talk about what's happened. We literally just finished opening statements in the first criminal prosecution of Donald Trump. And there were some very big revelations in this series of opening statements. The first is that, and I don't think we knew this before today, there is tape of Donald Trump participating in setting up the catch and kill conspiracy that led to the payoff of Stormy Daniels and the subsequent fraudulent creation of documents that are at the heart of the case. This is going to be a very dynamic prosecution. And one of the things that I think was very clear from the very beginning of this opening statement is that they are telling the story in sequential order, which is one of the things that I predicted was going to be the case. We're going to start with David Pecker and the origin of the catch and kill conspiracy. I am certain that we are going to have admission of a tape where Donald Trump is heard working out the details of that, according to what the prosecution said. We're also going to thereafter be moving on to, apparently, testimony about Karen McDougal, who is the Playboy playmate who Trump was alleged to have had an affair with for the better part of a year while he was married to Melania. As I said this morning, by the way, for those of you who are wondering why his wife is not in the courtroom, I mean, there's an exponential number of reasons for that, but that is going to be one of them. And then we will be moving on to the issue of Stormy Daniels and exactly what happened there, the payoff to her attorney that then went to her. And we also now know that we knew this before, but this has now been presented as a part of the opening statement, that Trump then engaged in the payoff of Michael Cohen for the front for that payments to Stormy Daniels, including by writing 2 checks from his personal bank account while he was in the Oval Office. This is going to be an extremely attention-grabbing trial. I know there were some concerns from the very beginning about whether or not some of this was going to get dry at certain points. And certainly the response, the opening statement from the defense, tried to couch it in that way, that this is just going to be about 34 pieces of paper. But it's very, very clear that it's not. And from what I can tell from the opening statement, this is going to be a case that is going to grab the jury's attention and not let go, which is what you want. And also that it's going to be very hard for Donald Trump to weasel out of the facts that are going to be presented. So really solid opening argument from the prosecution, in my estimation. The defense, on the other hand, is making a lot of wild statements like it's not illegal to interfere in an election. I mean, they said influence an election, but election interference is a federal crime, and that's one of the underlying crimes that has made this case a series of felonies instead of misdemeanors. So that was kind of a rich statement. And the other thing that happened in Blanche's opening statement was that twice he ran afoul of prior rulings of the judge. Once when he tried to do an advice of counsel inference, where he tried to imply that Donald Trump was just taking advice from his lawyers when he did this and he didn't know anything about it. I think the tape's going to disprove that. I think the testimony is going to disprove that, but we shall see. And the second time when he claimed that Michael Cohen had perjured himself in the New York civil fraud case, when in fact the ruling of the Judge Engoron in that case was that Michael Cohen had told the truth. Now, the problem with these things is that, of course, you can't unring the bell once Blanche has said these things to the jury, but the jury saw the judge strike those statements from the record and sustain objections. And that in and of itself, with a jury that is apparently this rapt on what is being said in the courtroom and paying this close of attention to the judge, does not help Donald Trump's case one bit. All right. So there are some extremely significant things happening in the courtroom this morning. And I just want everybody to be aware that any concerns that I had about parts of this case dragging on have now been sort of ameliorated by the way in which the prosecution is going to move forward on this case. All right. We did have Sandoval rulings before opening statements started. So just to remind everybody, the Sandoval rulings are about what Donald Trump can be cross-examined on should he take the stand in terms of prior bad acts. All right. Only two things were excluded from that. One was the finding of sanctions in the RICO case that he tried to file against Hillary Clinton, where he and Alina Habba were sanctioned $1 million. And the second is related to, the Trump Organization's criminal prosecution related to, I believe that was the one related to the foundation. All right. And those two do not surprise me because they're sort of outside of the scope of this particular case, but everything else comes in. 6 different rulings from the civil fraud case, the Trump had committed fraud, the jury findings from the E. Jean Carroll cases. So all of this is going to make it very difficult should Trump take the stand. And I'm just going to say it. I said it last week twice. I'm going to say it again here that, I don't think there's any way in hell that he's going to testify in this case, notwithstanding what he has said to the press. It is very clear to me, particularly in light of these Sandoval rulings, that if he insists on taking the stand, and no legitimate attorney would recommend that he do that, if he insists on taking the stand, he is going to be walking into an absolute hornet's nest of prior actions indicating fraud, lying, deceit, and everything else. And so, defamation is a crime of character. This is not going to be an easy run for Donald Trump at all. That's probably the understatement of this broadcast, should he choose to take the witness stand. So the Sandoval rulings, would appear to me to be the nail in the coffin of the issue of whether or not Donald Trump takes the stand. Now, we do know from Todd Blanche's opening statement that Trump has railroaded his lawyers into saying certain things that are totally not relevant. Like Sandoval went on about why we call him the president of the United States and that he's earned that. And the fact that he's such a successful businessman, blah, 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 blah. All of this nonsense is not something that you would ordinarily expect to see a defense attorney say in an opening statement. So there is certainly a possibility that Donald Trump will try to railroad his own attorneys into being able to take the stand. And I'm going to say everything that I have said about this in the prior weeks about subornation of perjury and what that could mean for the attorneys involved. And I think it is extremely unlikely. I would call it 99 to 1% chance that Donald Trump does not take the stand. All right. So that's that. Now, we did have a juror issue this morning, which has been resolved. Prior to the court handing down its Sandoval rulings and opening statements taking place, there was a juror who had apparently had some concerns about pretrial publicity or publicity related to the case. We don't know the details of that. That was handled in what's called in camera, which means in the judge's chambers, out of the viewing of the press and the public. And apparently reassurances were given about this because the juror is still on the jury panel. I have to remind everyone that there are 6 alternates. I know there are commentators out there in the ecosphere who are very worried about this. I'm not one of them. I will just tell you that judges are absolutely loath to remove jurors unless there is a true conflict of interest or a health issue once a jury panel has been sat. So this is a very classic situation to expect where there is an issue. The lawyers are brought into the judge's chambers to discuss it out of the hearing of the press and anyone else. The juror is then meets with the judge gives reassurances, and the juror remains on the panel. That is how I will expect certain things to take place here. Okay, apparently court is back in session and David Pecker has been called. I'm not going to be super long today. There's going to be a second broadcast this afternoon. I'm just going to tell you guys that about David Pecker. So we'll cover David Pecker in a minute, but I want to get to a couple of other related issues, okay? There is a ruling this morning, what appears to be a ruling, or rather an agreement in the bond matter, all right? And I want everybody to be aware that this agreement is a good thing. I don't want people to be under the impression that because an agreement has been reached, it means Trump has gotten away with something. Okay, so while all of this was going on, there was a hearing being held in Judge Engoron's courtroom to the effect that the bond was insufficient, according to Letitia James. And while the hearing was underway, there was a break, and there was a discussion between Chris Kise, who is the attorney for Donald Trump in the New York civil fraud case, and Letitia James's attorneys, and an agreement was reached. The agreement is apparently that Knight Insurance will now have exclusive control of Donald Trump's Schwab investment account, which is all in cash, in the amount of $175 million. And essentially that Trump can't touch it and they can't do anything with that money. So what this means basically is that Trump's entire Schwab brokerage account that was put up as collateral is now out of his hands. And this in and of itself is a way of maintaining that there is no chance that this collateral will be destroyed or devalued or otherwise altered in any way between now and when the appeal is complete. It is essentially a manner of making sure that that $175 million in cash goes directly to Letitia James in the event that Trump loses his appeal, which he will. All right. So this is actually a very solid outcome. In part because one of the things that it means is that we're going to be in a position where $175 million in cash is being held basically in receivership until Trump loses his appeal. I don't have any issues for this. No problems with it. The E. Jean Carroll bond is secure. We're not even worried about that. This is not E. Jean Carroll. This is the New York civil fraud case. And I'm just going to say that it has been confirmed now for those who are asking in the questions that this is a different Schwab account from the one that is being used in the E. Jean Carroll case. So now we have $91 million tied up for E. Jean Carroll, $175 million tied up for the New York civil fraud case. In other words, Trump is broke. All right. We already knew this. This was a given. Even heading into the damages ruling in the second E. Jean Carroll case, he claimed he had $400 million in cash on hand. I never thought that was the case. I always thought that was a lie. But right now, basically like $265 million of his own money is out of his hands. So this is a very good result. I'm not bothered by it. I think that, if this agreement had not been reached, Judge Engoron would have booted the bond and we would have been starting over. But that is not where we are. Okay. All right. We had one final question that I want to address this morning before we go back to the testimony of David Pecker. I'm going to say it again to everyone here. There will be a second broadcast this afternoon. Court is only going on for like another 15 minutes today. All right. And I've got a couple other things I have to take care of this morning, but we'll do a recap of what Pecker has said later on this afternoon. There was a question about what happens in the Supreme Court presidential immunity argument, which, by the way, is taking place on Thursday. And that question, of course, came in through our Patreon feed. Reminder, if this work is meaningful to you, please consider becoming a paid subscriber at patreon.com/resistance live. They started as little as $2 a month. You get to ask me questions for 2 hours before every broadcast. You get early warnings of bonus broadcasts. You should do that if this work is helpful to you. Okay, the question was this. Assuming that the Supreme Court rules that Donald Trump does not have presidential immunity for the events of January 6th, how fast does that case get back on the books? So Judge Chutkan promised both sides that they would have the 88 days that were remaining to prepare for trial when that case was essentially stayed because the Supreme Court took certiorari. So assuming that the Supreme Court rules on its regular timetable, which would put a ruling basically sometime between April 25th, this Thursday, they're not going to rule that soon, and the end of June when the term is up. There will then be 88 days from the day that ruling comes down until trial is set. So assuming it comes down at the end of June, we would be looking at a trial date in September. All right. And I'm not bothered by that. I don't think anybody else should be bothered by that because fundamentally that means we will be at trial in the district court for the District of Columbia when the November election happens. Donald Trump will be sitting trial for criminal federal charges in the height of campaign season. I'm not bothered by it one bit. All right. So we'll have to see how long that will go on. All right. But at the moment, I want everybody to be very, very clear that this case where we sit right now is not a small case. This one that is being tried, everybody was like, oh, this is minor. This is back burner. This is not a small case. And I think anybody who reviewed what was going on in the opening statement this morning by the prosecution knows that. They made it crystal clear that this is a case about election interference. That is one of the themes of this case, that this was a criminal conspiracy to interfere in the 2016 election. It is an election interference case, just like the case in DC about January 6th is fundamentally an election interference case. This is a course of conduct that has been strung over the last 9 years. And I think at this point, we've all got to get very, very clear about where we sit. This is not a small deal. 34 felonies, which can carry up to 4 years in prison apiece. All right. And we've had a lot of talk on this broadcast historically about how that time could be served, whether it will be served, what the likely sentence is. I've looked at thousands of cases literally about this under New York law. And so we're in a situation right now where this case in and of itself may be enough to put Trump in prison like through the election. And I will just say that there is no presidential immunity for this case. I'm going to repeat this. I've said it here before. There is no presidential immunity in the New York case that is underway right now because the conduct precedes his election. So the presidential immunity argument has been rejected. It is not something that is going to stop this case. In fact, nothing is going to stop this case at this point because the New York Appellate Division is sick of him. And we will have to see where things go at this point. All right. Final comment that I just want to make today about the gravity of this case. And I said this to all of our Patreon subscribers yesterday on our Patreon only Sunday coffee hour. I want to encourage everyone here to stop cracking jokes about Trump's bodily functions and all this other nonsense in the court. That reporting has not been confirmed by any legitimate news source, okay? And I want to just remind everyone as well that what we are dealing with here in this particular case is as serious as it gets. You take away from the gravity of a conspiracy to pay off witnesses that would have kept Trump out of the White House when you reduce what is happening in that courtroom to whether or not Trump has an upset stomach, all right? I am not entertained. I don't find the potty humor amusing. And frankly, I think it takes away from the serious gravity of what is happening right now in this courtroom. I know we all enjoy a little bit of schadenfreude here from time to time, but I said this to our viewers yesterday, and I'm going to say it here again today. I'm not convinced at this point, after everything that has happened in the last couple of days, that that was not just a throwaway claim for clicks. All right. We don't see CNN talking about it. We don't see MSNBC talking about it. And why would they, by the way? Because what's happening in this courtroom is of critical importance right now, critical importance to the future of our democracy. Now, I know I'm going to say this, by the way, and I'm going to say it again. All right. Good legal minds differ on whether or not this case is going to end up in Trump's imprisonment. Okay. I am not alone, and neither is the precedent in concluding that there's a strong likelihood that if Trump is convicted here, he will do time. Other lawyers disagree, but I'm going to tell you right now, everybody who's running around with all this stuff of he won't ever serve time, he's not going to do time. I think Judge Merchan has seen what he needs to see here in terms of whether or not Trump has remorse, whether or not he has accepted accountability. We're going to see that in the sentencing phase when it comes. And, you know, we will see what the conclusion is at that point. But I think anybody who's running around claiming Trump isn't going to do time on this needs to take a breath and see where this case ends up. All right. So I just want to remind everyone that we are here. Right. I even had a moment this morning before opening statements began where I was like, wow, I can't believe we've actually arrived at this moment where Trump is facing down criminal liability in front of a jury. These are very serious and historic moments. And but for everything that we know so far, the jury is taking this extremely seriously. We owe them for their public service, and we owe this judge our attention to this matter with the gravity that it deserves. And so I want to encourage everyone to move in the direction of paying very close attention to this because it is critical to the future of American democracy. And also understanding that this is the justice system at work. It is so flawed. Our justice system is so flawed. Don't get me started. But this is how it's supposed to happen, right? And we've now got 6 weeks of this, maybe less, because the prosecution is moving at a very rapid clip. Before we see whether or not Trump is going to be found guilty, and I'm just going to call it, I think he will be. So this is it for today. We're at almost 3,000 viewers here live right now in this broadcast. Please hit the thumbs up. Please like and subscribe here on this channel. I'm here every day, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, and with bonus broadcasts the entire time the trial is going on. For those of you who are new to me, I have 15 years of experience practicing in court in New York and in Washington, D.C., was educated as a lawyer in Washington, D.C. I've done a lot of very high-profile cases, including white-collar cases themselves. And this is kind of my bailiwick, all right? So I will be here for all of this. Please subscribe. And if you want to ask me questions, I will remind everyone that you can become a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistancelive for as little as $2 a month. Right now, that's working out to about $0.05 a broadcast. And you get to ask questions, join Progressive Coffee Hour every Sunday, and I will answer your questions live on the air. All right, everyone. So I will see you later on this afternoon with an update on David Pecker. Patreon subscribers, stay tuned for the time for that. I will also put it out on my threads. All right. It's a very big day, people. And I want to thank all of our subscribers who have been here for the last 7 years. You guys make it all worth it. I'm very grateful to you. Much love, everyone. And let's get on to David Pecker. All right. I'll see you this afternoon. Take care, everyone. Bye.